Coach was talking a little about the Catapult system that you guys have. Just talk a little about that process.
Yeah, so obviously the difference between game speed and practice speed. When it comes to the game, right, Catapult will allow us to kind of take a look at the game demands, and then we can kind of see if we're actually hitting those velocities in practice when I track these guys from a practice standpoint using the GPS units. So the GPS units will track a variety of different things. I mean, the Catapult system tracks anywhere from 500 to 550 different metrics. So what we're really looking to do is obviously give the coaches feedback, but when it comes to our side of things and trying to develop what we need to develop from a physical preparation standpoint, it's important for us to be able to understand what the game is actually asking of these players, and then to be able to somewhat mirror that, or at least progress it throughout the offseason in a way that's sensible and obviously makes sense to that. We can say, hey, at the end of the day, these guys are actually prepared for what the game is asking of them from a distance standpoint, from an explosive movement standpoint, from a velocity standpoint, and obviously just from an overall load standpoint. So we use the Catapult from that standpoint to try to be able to make sure that we're tracking those things. When we talk about speed in the off season and what we do to develop it in a very predicted environment, right? When we're out here on the turf and we have our training session, we're doing some sprint work. We're coaching the guys up, we're cueing them up, we're giving them things to think about, right? They have their effort, and their effort is based off of the conscious cueing that we're giving them. Well, in a game, obviously, that's not really the case. A little bit more of a chaotic environment, unpredictable, right? So we need to be able to kind of teach them the rules and then teach them how to break the rules, right? So we teach them the rules as far as how to sprint properly and how to obviously gain some of the speeds and some of the velocities that we ideally can enhance. And then the goal is to kind of get them to a point where they can produce those speeds, or at least certain percentages of those speeds in different variations and different situations that might arise during the game, right? So kind of like teaching the rules, and then kind of vary and bend and break and just kind of get to where we need to bend without breaking and get them to where we need to get them for the game. So Catapult allows us to obviously just monitor load. We can look at it from an injury reduction standpoint, and obviously we can look at it from a performance standpoint and try to track performance metrics. But from an injury reduction standpoint, it's nice to say, hey, well, if we know a kid is capable of hitting 23 miles an hour, right? Saturday should not be the first time throughout the week that they should be hitting 23 miles an hour. Right? We want to make sure that obviously the muscles, tendons, ligaments, everything is fully prepared to be able to handle that load and handle that velocity on game day. So maybe hitting a certain percentage of that velocity 2 or 3 times a week might be able to help better prepare them from obviously a performance standpoint to make sure that they can get there on Saturday, but also make sure that when they do go there, for whatever reason they might have to go there, that they are prepared to do so. So I think it's super beneficial from that standpoint. And I think really when it comes down to is we're physical preparation coaches, and we're looking for ways to obviously develop the physical qualities, strength, power, and the ability to repeat those efforts and express them throughout the course of a game. And then it's nice to rely on some of the great coaches that we have to be able to teach them some of the specific techniques and fundamentals that will actually allow them to express that ability for longer.
So these guys wearing sensors throughout all of practice?
Yep, throughout all of practice, yeah. And like I said, we track practice and we track games. I think we're really fortunate to be able to track games because, like I said, if we can't track games, then what are we really basing our methods off of, right? So right now we're getting to a point where we can really identify hey, if you're a specific, say you're a DB and you play X amount of snaps, say, just throw a number out there, 65 snaps, this is the amount of distance in terms of yards that you need to be prepared for. This is the amount of explosive movements that you need to be prepared for. These are the velocities you might need to be prepared for. And we also track impacts, right? So things like that, where they'll say, be able to say, hey, we know that you're going to be exposed to this many types of G-forces, right? And how often will that happen throughout the course of a game? Some of those things you can't really manipulate, but to be able to track them is super helpful, yeah.
And I'm sure guys, when they talk to the training staff, they're kind of hesitant to say that maybe they're injured or banged up. Do you look at and monitor on a day-to-day basis the performance of each guy and to see if they're fully healthy?
Yes, and definitely. So that's where we can get into the injury reduction standpoint. What we actually did at the end of the season was I took a look at every single injury that we had. And I took a look at the day that injury took place, and I tried to give a global view, so sort of work backwards about 3 to 4 weeks. And depending on what the injury was, say it was an ankle injury, right? I wanted to take a look at things like the overall distance that they covered, change of direction left, change of direction right, maybe look at some impacts, maybe also look at some of the velocities and the high-speed distance. The high-speed distance is pretty much any, for us, it's set at 16 miles an hour, so any distance they covered over 16 miles an hour for our guys. Right now we're starting to get into a little bit more of an individualized position where it'll be 75% or above of their max velocity. So after I took a look at that, to be able to say, okay, well, what can we notice as far as trends and patterns? And Bob Howard, our head of sports medicine here, is great with that stuff. He was super excited to be able to just take a look at some raw data and say, hey, well, here are some patterns and some habits that we noticed. it's sport, so injuries are going to happen for sure. But obviously, it's helpful when you have something that you can take a look back on and say, wow, well, we saw a massive spike in his impacts here, and this is a shoulder injury that he had, right? This was X amount of numbers higher than he typically is exposed to. Maybe in the future we can go about it in a certain way from a return to play standpoint, being able to say, hey, like, let's give him 30% of what we need to do from an impact standpoint today, and then maybe 40% this week, that kind of thing. So it's super helpful, super nice. Obviously, like I said, sport's a little unpredictable, so there's not much you can do from that standpoint sometimes, but being able to monitor what we do in practice is super helpful.
When did you get to UConn?
Spring of 2018, actually. I was an intern. Started spring of 2018, yep. Then, professional intern, and then moved into a full-time assistant, and then Matt actually just promoted me to staff assistant. So it's been a crazy year. Yeah.
What's it like working for Coach King?
It's the best. It really is. And
somebody so passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's super helpful just because, like, obviously I love the guy. I think he's done a great job from the standpoint of coming in and being able to take care of his people and really give us all the opportunities we need to excel. But he cares about his people. He cares about the people that are going to work for him and work with him. And he's going to make sure that he's going to maximize the potential of each one of his assistants and everybody around him. He's a big logistics guy. He's going to take a look at all of the pieces, right? And he's really going to try to put the pieces of those puzzles together and really get it to a point where you can say, okay, I know this guy's strengths, I know his weaknesses, I'm going to put him in a position where he can succeed while also challenging him just enough to raise some of the weaknesses that he does have. Of course, he's super passionate. Of course, he's super energetic. But what we do as a profession, right, strength coaches, it's much more than just bringing the so-called juice, right? It's being pretty methodical and calculated in how you go about approaching the day-to-day operation, and he's great about that stuff. So I owe the past year and a half to Matt, actually, because when he came in here, he really just pushed me to the top, and he really allowed me to kind of get to where I am now, and I probably wouldn't be where I am right now without Matt. So it's I'm super fortunate to have Matt come into my life for sure.
Awesome. Going back to the Catapult, when did you guys first start implementing that? Is that new this spring, or is that something last year?
So it was late in August is when we had our first practice session where we tracked. I believe it was the week of August 23rd. August 23rd, yeah. So we had it for our first game versus Wagner. And so it's about a half of a year, right, of raw data, which is, from a scientific perspective, not terribly a lot. Right? But it's getting to a point where we can actually start to look at trends and be able to feel comfortable with somewhat of a universal language and notice some things that are starting to make our mark on what we would consider the UConn way.